About a year and a half ago, I'd just finished the dreaded ritual of networking at a conference when I heard ringing in my ears. Put my cup of tea down on a table and tried to make my way over to a chair, but instead I became disoriented and stumbled around before collapsing. I woke up a few seconds later. I was surrounded by people. I was shaking and my ankle was swollen because I twisted it while falling down. But most importantly, I had this tremendous headache, and it was the most intense pain I've ever experienced. By the time the ambulance came, I was vomiting, and the pain continued to mount. I was rushed to the hospital where a CT scan revealed bleeding in my brain, caused by a ruptured aneurysm. An aneurysm is basically like a little balloon that forms in your blood vessel. And like a balloon, it grows and expands enough it can break and leak, resulting in life-threatening conditions. At the hospital, they scheduled my surgery for the next morning. Though in the meantime, every hour, a nurse or doctor would come by to check if I was still responsive and stable. And each time, they'd ask me what my name was, where it was, and what the date was. Avril, Espinosa-Malpica, Vancouver General Hospital, June 29, 2017. A couple hours later, I was laying there in the neuro ICU in pain and exhausted from the constant examinations that didn't let me rest properly, when I became super annoyed as the light rudely awakened me. It was very bright and a deep orange. It was sort of like the warning lights on top of a truck. It took me a few seconds to realize that it was sunrise. Even though every movement rattled my head and hurt, I forced myself to turn around and prop myself up to watch, because I was really scared, and I didn't know what would happen. The only thing I knew, thanks to my extensive medical knowledge, came from binge watching Grey's Anatomy, was that neurosurgery was serious. And during the surgery, the doctors performed a craniotomy right over my left temple, and they placed a small metal clip in my brain over the rupture to seal it. I also ended up with 27 staples on the left side of my head. I was extremely lucky to have fully recovered, even though it took a few months, because I later found out that 40% of people with ruptured aneurysms don't make it. And of the survivors, 2/3 are left with permanent neurological deficits. But my recovery wasn't just physical. Over the next few months, I also mentally and emotionally struggled. So I've been forced to examine my life so far, and I realized that I've fallen short on my aspirations. Over time, the more I thought about it, I began to see that this was in part due to the confidence gap. And the confidence gap is a phenomenon where equally skilled individuals feel less competent than their counterparts only because they've internalized feelings of discrimination, not because they're any less capable. Growing up, probably like many in this room, I had this amazing fantasy that one day I'd leave my mark on the world. You know, nothing fancy, just win a Nobel Prize or make it on Forbes 30 under 30 list. But seriously, as I looked back, I thought about it and I realized that I'd fallen short of my own potential. But more importantly, I was not on my way to achieving anything meaningful, which made me feel lost and disheartened and insignificant. At the age of 24, this was not easy to deal with, and I would actually get visibly upset about it, which my parents cannot understand because they were just happy that I was alive. But the more I struggled with these feelings and I tried to make sense of them, I realized that one thing that stopped me from going after competitive opportunities was myself. I'd undeservingly thought that I did not have sufficient experience or qualifications to take on impactful and meaningful roles. And I let myself down in not trusting my own potential or owning my power. My experience is not unique, though. Many other groups have internalized all kinds of isms, which instill self-doubt and cause them to hold back. For women in particular, there's an extensive amount of research done to show how widespread the effects of the confidence gap are. In one Hewlett-Packard report, they show that while men apply for a job or a promotion when they meet 60% of the qualifications, women only apply if they meet 100% of them. Similarly, another study, Professor Babcock, showed that men initiate salary negotiations 4 times as often as women. And even when women do negotiate, they ask for 30% less. Okay, one more, you know where I'm going with this. Professor Davidson did an experiment with her business students. She asked them how much they expected to earn 5 years after graduation. The men thought they deserved $80,000 a year. The women, $64,000, 20% less. Clearly, this lack of self-confidence then that leads to undervaluing ourselves can have serious repercussions, not just in our lives, but in our careers. Now, I've experienced my share of sexism, racism, ageism, bullying, which I believe affected how I viewed myself and behaved. As a visible minority, it's not surprising that I've been negatively affected by comments such as being called a fake Canadian, even though I was born in Canada and I've lived here almost 2/3 of my life. This is only because I didn't fit the stereotype. I've also been called a Sasquatch by other kids because, like many other Latin American women, the hair on my legs was darker and more obvious than that of the blonde girls in my class. Add to this a layer of gender discrimination, and you can start to see how my confidence took a hit. When we left Mexico 16 years ago, my parents said it was because here in Canada, my sister and I, as women, would have more opportunities to grow and be respected. And while this is certainly true, and I'm so thankful they brought us here, I've also come to see that even in progressive countries like ours, women still experience forms of sexism that slowly chip away at our confidence. Now, working in the field of international trade, like I do, I've noticed a subtle sexism. Most recently, we received an email from a client to an organizational mailbox with a salutation of "Dear Sirs," which really threw me off because this person assumed that a woman wouldn't be working in this field or be able to help. As women, we're also judged more harshly and feel less confident about our looks. This one day, I went into work, as well as I usually do because I feel like I always need to give it the right impression, when a male colleague of mine showed up wearing ripped jeans, a tank top, and a hoodie, ready for a night out after work, which I don't think I could ever get away with. I mean, can you imagine if women started showing up to work in their clubbing outfits? There's also a contrast when you think about it, how much our looks get noticed, and also how hard it is to get noticed as women. There's been plenty of times when I work with a male partner on a project and I put in most of the work, I did a substantial contribution, yet because I wasn't the one that presented the project, I got little or no recognition, which is sadly really common according to Dr. Hammonds and Hines, who did a study on male-female partnerships. And this trend to having to work harder than a male counterparts to get noticed, it's only emphasized by a disturbing finding from a Hewlett-Packard report, McKinsey report, which showed that while women get promoted based on their achievements so far, makes sense, men get promoted based on their potential. These are just a few examples that affected how I viewed myself and behaved and my confidence. And sadly, they're very common. They're not nearly as bad as what other people face. Yet shockingly, even though I was proud of myself and I grew up very fortunate, events like this still got to me. I mean, before my surgery, I hadn't really taken a chance in applying for anything other than jobs in university. Fast forward a few months later, I was back to work at my internship at Global Affairs Canada when I got an email. Applications were open for the UBC Arts Co-op Undergraduate Student of the Year Award. It was daunting at first to apply because I knew it was competitive, and I was still feeling some self-doubt. Because, spoiler, the brain surgery didn't give me any magical powers or immediate self-confidence. And by the way, I'm still really annoyed I didn't suddenly become fluent in another language after the doctors tinker with my brain. But what I've come to realize is that gaining self-confidence is an incremental process, which builds on every action. And the key word being action, not standing still. For me, the first step into realizing that I was perhaps lacking some confidence and that I wasn't really valuing who I was or what I had to offer, I think really came after my surgery. Afterwards, I started to receive hundreds of messages from both close friends and family and people I hadn't spoken to in years. And I felt that outpour of love and support, which allowed me to see how much I was appreciated by others, and also glimpse a little bit of how others saw me, which was super humbling and eye-opening. So knowing this, and then beginning to recognize that, if I'd been able to get this internship at Global Affairs Canada, which I've been dreaming about for years, then maybe I was doing something right, and maybe I could get this award too. I ended up being selected for this recognition, and it meant so much to me because it nudged me towards realizing even more that I had something to offer. And what followed was a year of many highlights. I ended up getting involved with this women empowerment organization, Girls 20, and joining the board of directors of Immigrant Women's Services Ottawa. I also got to do an ad for my university, which involved some really cool drones, and got published in UBC's International Photojournal. After 7 years, I finally graduated, and I braved moving across the country to pursue a career in international affairs. And I made it here. And all this happened because I stopped doubting myself so much. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's still moments where confidence escapes me, and ironically, even applying to be here today, I wasn't sure I could do it, because I didn't think I was a good public speaker. But once again, I proved I wasn't being fair to myself. And every time I proved myself wrong, only helped to diminish that confidence gap. And I think it's also important to acknowledge that not everything's worked out this year, and that's okay. It's okay to fail, as long as we keep trying and learning. Gaining confidence is not suddenly going to eliminate discrimination. And I'll be the first to admit that simply focusing on the confidence gap completely oversimplifies complex discrimination issues, so it's going to take time to attain some goals. But it matters that we keep trying, because we shouldn't live in a world where women are only paid about 70% of what men are, and where women only hold 15% of all leadership roles. Now, this isn't only morally problematic, but it's also a huge economic issue. When I was writing my senior economics research paper on the effects of women in leadership on GDP, I came across a ton of research out there that describes how achieving gender equality can bring large economic benefits. In one study, it described how in Canada, if we achieve gender equality by 2026, we could add $150 billion to our GDP, which roughly more than the total GDP for Hungary. Clearly then, there are huge economic benefits to this. But unfortunately, if we keep going on the current path that we're on, it's going to take us about 170 years to achieve gender equality, according to the World Economic Forum. We don't have 170 years to wait. If we want to be included in the conversations that will dramatically shift this path into a more diverse one, then it's time we find the confidence to use our voice. Obviously, I wish I never had a brain aneurysm rupture. And there's easier ways to gain a bit of confidence. I mean, seriously, don't try my method at home. But realizing my own worth and potential was an invaluable silver lining to this experience. It really affected me, and I've noticed that not only in my achievements, but also in how I behave myself and how I act, and how I approach opportunities. For example, remember that networking event I talked about at the beginning? The one where my nerves were racing so much and my pulse was going up so hard that it literally made my brain explode. Well, I now go into this type of opportunities more comfortable, because I know that the next person I talk to will benefit from what I have to offer. And I also don't let any of the isms, sexism, racism, ageism, or aneurysms dictate who I am or how I behave. And neither should you, because every action you take will build a bit of confidence and will accelerate the rate at which we, as a collective, can shatter the glass ceiling. So take a chance on yourself, not just for you, but for all of us, because standing still is not an option. Thank you.